Alrighty, this is the April 28th GUAC maintainers meeting. As a reminder, this is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. This meeting is subject to the Linux Foundation's antitrust policy and the OpenSSF Code of Conduct. I don't see any new friends to introduce themselves, so we can jump right in. And conveniently, I'm the one that put this on the agenda. So the 1.0 release, we talked last week. I shared our messaging doc with Kusari's marketing team, and they're the interest there is to have something out in by like have something be ready to go by say the end of May in terms of making that announcement publicly. Obviously, like we don't have to hold to that, but I was just trying to come up with. I know we still need to do docs updates to indicate what's supported versus experimental, and I'll assign that task to myself once I open the GitHub issue for that. I opened an issue on the Kusari Helm charts repo to move those to go to the GUACSec org. There doesn't seem to be any objection to that, but also nobody's taken any uh, direct steps to make that happen. So I'll keep leaning on that. My question on that is, and it's not something we have to solve this minute, but we need to figure out soon. Like, do we put it alongside the like Docker Compose files where it gets created as a release artifact, or do we maintain it separately? Um, the downside to maintaining it separately is then we have to manually go bump the version whenever we do a new release. But the other thing is, as I understand it, Helm charts require you to increment some integer uh, version number in the Helm chart. So if we include it as a release artifact, which I think is probably the most user-friendly way to do it, um, we'll have to have something in the release workflow that does that version bump for us. So that's something we'll have to figure out. It's probably straightforward. It's just I've never done anything like that. So I don't know off the top of my head how that's done. Was there anything else that we needed to do prior to being ready to actually get tag the 1.0?
I think code-wise, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing we need to do with the Helm charts is uh, add Postgres to it. Okay. So then I guess it's Mike's turn to talk about, or I guess you're pronouncing it mole.
Yeah. Um, so give me 1 second just to actually no, so I do have this here. Uh, why is it not there? 1 second here. All right.
Mm.
1 second, just trying to move my stuff around here. Hmm. So anyway, while I'm getting this set up here in a second, um, so one of the things I know we had talked about was like, hey, where does this like look towards like a 2.0, and like how are we looking towards stuff like a better uh whatchamacallit, data model, and maybe simpler in various ways. Um oh, that's my bad. And so I started playing around with Mole, and I will show that off now. just wanted to make sure I got everything set up. I had to restart a bunch of stuff and update over the weekend, so I didn't. So here, let me run this to ingest some SBOMs. It batch queries against OSV, yada yada. Again, this is very, very much proof of concept, very much a test here. So it's able to sort of ingest those SBOMs, vulnerabilities, yada yada. It runs everything locally. Right now, it's essentially storing everything via a JSON index, which I'll show here in a second once I kind of figure out how do I get this to not show up over there. I don't know why it, wow. Is there a way to turn off the annotations thing? Whatever. So what happens is all of that essentially gets stored in something called Mole, which has a bunch of stuff in there, has like essentially a cache. It's more of an index or like a storage, which I'll probably change the name of. And so, oops. Right. And so it stores all the service GitHub Service Advisor or OSV JSONs. It also stores all of the packages. Right now, it stores them all as these npm, all these various JSON files, and you can actually look at them and obviously need to include additional stuff in there as well. But it has some, basic information about when the thing was integrated. Obviously, we can include more metadata about each of those things. Ideally, what I want to do is what I'm currently doing with the SBOMs, where I actually am storing the SBOMs via paths, via their, essentially via their top level Perl, which again is not much different than sort of how we're doing some of these things, just as opposed to doing it inside a database. I'm just sort of doing it as part of file storage here. And so, hey, there's where the SBOM lives. What else? Mole slash.
Sorry, can I ask a dumb question?
Sure, yeah.
What why you I guess why are you ingesting for the packages stuff?
So the packages are just I'm parsing it out of the SBOM.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much what I'm trying to do is, as opposed to doing the OLTP sort of model of data stuff where like, hey, I'm essentially everything is like a transaction. I'm essentially saying that probably still makes sense, for example, for the cases of like GUAC itself and for things like Trustify or Trustification. But when it comes to a lot of the sort of basic analysis folks want to do is they're just like, hey, I just have a thing and tell me what I know about it. And again, it's okay for this to be 10 minutes out of date, 30 minutes out of date, an hour out of date, 10 seconds out of date, depending on how you kind of set it up. But then I also have this essentially the simple store, which essentially is just an index that sort of maps all those things together. Ideally, one of the things I want to kind of do with this is if it's like, hey, this seems like a pretty interesting path forward. One of the things I want to be able to do with this is be able to have it, for folks who are familiar with like the Apache big data stuff. I want to be able to essentially store all the stuff and then also separately translate them into or transform them, ETL them into things like Apache Parquet files, which you can then, use to then do some of these higher level things, and then also makes it very quick, while also, again, the idea here being, yes, in certain contexts, folks are going to need sub-second queries for something. In our case, I don't think that's the case, where if I were to run this again and ingest the SBOM, and ingest the SBOMs, having it run like that, hey, here's a handful of maybe okay. And again, this is using some very naive stuff. Using my actual I recreated an OSV scanner. Like if you actually have an OSV index locally and you have a bunch of this other stuff internally, you can essentially get like essentially what I just showed off sub probably like 500 milliseconds. Um, but like, hey, again, trying to keep it relatively simple. What else? Oh yeah. So then the other things I can also do here, I have a bunch of different commands that I've been testing out. Some of them don't work yet, but I can give like most vulnerable, right? Just kind of do that, and essentially just looks up the index. Um, Again, most likely this would be something more akin to like a kubectl, like mole query, and then here's a set of canned queries, or like, similar to how we're doing it with again our sort of REST API, a bunch of that sort of stuff. Da, da, da. Um, I find some of the find package stuff a little not the best. Like if I were to go and say, hey, run this, again, I think I have to, whoops, dash dash package ID. Oh, it did actually, I did fix it. Okay. It wasn't working a few days ago, and then I rebased all my stuff, so I probably fixed it. Dayon.
Just a quick question about OS3 stuff. So how do you, while ingesting, you're querying, batch querying the OSP service for vulnerabilities and saving those files, or?
Yes, currently yes, and the idea would be to probably set up some lifetime, because again, each of those things, the ingestion time is also tracked. And so the idea would be like, hey, let's say you set it up like dash dash, no cache or whatever, or update cache, or hey, if it notices, because I know that one of the challenges a little bit is you can end up with the situation where like, yes, this vulnerability exists, but it's been updated, right? Because OSV updates specifically for like in cases of this advisory has been revoked. So in cases like that, you probably want to be able to update it. And so again, it's probably okay if it's out of date by, I don't know, some handful of minutes, some handful of hours, whatever. But being able to kind of do that is probably pretty useful. So I can also just sort of list a bunch of stuff in the store. Again, these are just sort of very basic things I started like playing around with. Um, some of the stuff I'm trying to still figure out is some of the transitive stuff as well. The SBOMs themselves, oh, I think I should, yeah, is kind of via the top level component, assuming it exists. Otherwise, everything gets thrown into an unknown. It stores all those files by their hash as well. So again, if you get a new SBOM, it just so happens to just throw that SBOM in the same directory, and then you can very easily kind of query it that way as well. What else here? So if I want to find out more information about just this one package, unexpected. Oh, right, dash dash Perl. I need to keep this consistent. But here's, hey, this package is found in these SBOMs. Currently unknown SBOM, but obviously I would love to include the clearly defined and everything else. And then here's the vulnerabilities that are associated with it. Brendan.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned like kind of like designing it for being run on like a data processor like Apache, or like I imagine Apache Beam or something like that. So I guess my question is, you mentioned like targeting for that, in which I imagine it's just like, here are the predicates, here are the mappings, all in different files, and they can feed it to it. And then you also mentioned like index. Are they two separate things, or is kind of like the predicates are being used as an index as well?
So some of this is being used. So there's two purposes. So right now nothing is using Parquet yet. And some of those other things. I do want to do that because I think the thing is, I want to store all the stuff because again, file storage is cheap. And this includes like even running this on your laptop because I feel like if you're like, well, I'm parsing 20 gigs of SBOMs on my laptop and you're restoring those 20 gigs again, and then you're also storing it ETL, like you're ETLing it to then store it as Parquet files. So now you're actually, now we're using close to 60 gigs. It's like at that point, if you're doing 20 gigs of SBOMs, you probably at that point are probably looking at GUAC, or you're also looking, trustification, or you're looking at like running whatever this thing is on blob storage somewhere, right? You're probably not looking at running this all sort of locally. But right now, all I'm doing is just doing the simple case where I have that sort of index. But I think long term, I want to kind of have most of the files that get ingested. Like there might still be an index for some of those files because what you might end up having is because there's a thing called iceberg, which essentially iceberg is akin to BigQuery, I think. The BigQuery or Bigtable, whatever the non-transactional one is. Um, uh, but pretty much what iceberg is you could think of it as it's SQL or SQL-like syntax that allows transactions, allows all these other things, as long as you're willing to give up normal like OLTP sort of transaction times. So you're talking about like the difference between, hey, I have uh, somebody bought something from my store. I need to immediately decrement and have that transaction go through ASAP because giving somebody a misunderstanding of like, hey, you have this thing in your cart and it's no longer there. We want to kind of get that super, super quick. That's probably, you don't need that with your SBOMs and all of the supply chain metadata. It's probably okay to get that within a second, handful of seconds, even maybe a handful of minutes, depending on your particular use case. So the idea here would be you store all the basic data, you have it there. You have maybe some sort of index on where to find those files so that you could always go back to where those files live. Because again, one of the things I would love to be able to say is like, hey, I want to output this. I want to output these SBOMs to trustification. I want to output these SBOMs to GUAC and be able to just sort of run a command to be able to then pull those things in. Separately, you want to be able to also have those files that if at some point in the future we say, hey, we changed the schema and we do need to rechange the ingestion, you could do that. Now, supposedly at least, again, I don't know enough about Parquet, but supposedly at least, Parquet is essentially a binary format a columnar binary format that will allow exporting back to JSON with no loss. There might still be some context of like the organization of the JSON might be different, in which case, need to kind of investigate. But either way,
There's no such thing as canonical JSON.
sure. But what I mean is like you talk to some folks and are like, well, when I gave you this JSON file, right? When I gave you this JSON file, components. Oh, actually, that's probably even a.
Like, yeah, I can see like the signature not matching would be a problem, but like other than that, like
Yeah. Well, I think it's less about.
So
Oh,
so I think one of the things that I was curious, and this is something I've been thinking about, and I kind of want to explore is like the GUAC AI Modi stuff, and I feel like if you're kind of taking the information in and then you're spitting out the predicates, right? Which I think maybe we have to, based on what you're doing, is like maybe this is part of the new ontology, right? Like you spit out a bunch of JSON, and then we can put it into a vectorization.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of throw the AI stuff more effectively at it as using the ontology predicates.
Yeah. I think so. And one of the things I just realized I was doing is because actually you're right. The reason why these files don't look like their original SBOMs, because like normally this would normally you'd have metadata up at the top and blah blah blah, is I forgot that what I do is I actually parse the JSON, do all my work, and then I dump the JSON out, and through that serialization process, it just sort of decides whatever it wants to decide on the serialization, which I realize I probably should just copy over the original file, but that's neither here nor there for this conversation. But yeah, no. So the idea again would be, so when it comes to a lot of this stuff, for the most part, one of the things that Parquet also gets you is Parquet gets you the ability to, from my understanding, you should be able to keep a Parquet file indefinitely. And the standard is essentially almost clearly set in stone. So there's not going to be the case where you need to regenerate a Parquet file. There might be a couple of cases, but this is where you could potentially say, hey, I'm saving all of this data canonically as Parquet. And then those Parquet files can be used by everything else. So you can have Parquet turn it into an Apache Arrow file. You could use it with Avro. You could use it with Spark. You could use it with Iceberg. You could use it with even Tinkerpop for graph stuff. So you could use all of those for all of those different things. And so that's kind of where I was thinking like, oh, cool. This seems like a thing to do this. Now, this is one of the things I ended up doing because of that is as you can see, it's all written in Rust. And this is not purely because like, oh my gosh, Mike likes Rust. Part of it is, hey, Mike likes Rust. But part of it is actually I looked at libraries in Go for a lot of these things, and there's not great libraries for a lot of those for the big Apache big data stuff. It's essentially Java, Python, and now most recently Rust. And since and so that's one of the reasons why I ended up choosing to write at least this tool in Rust. One of the other reasons is like you could do really cool, so my OSV scanner thing here, so here's something that like I'm not using this in Mole yet, but one of the things I can do is oh, whoops. It's actually right is I can use Rayon, which is a parallelization library, and some of these other ones to essentially process like SBOM files concurrently and some of that other stuff, which I need to actually pull into what I did because most of my stuff is single threaded in the thing I was showing off. But you could get pretty fast with this. But anyway, just wanted to show that off. Again, this is like my what he works on the weekend. A little bit. Also, this is tied into some of the stuff I would love to work on with the chain site stuff, which I know I showed off to some of you in a different context, where I would love to be able to say, hey, let's pull down all metadata related to this, pull it all, because one of the things I would love to have is in Toto attestations similar in that cache. So I can go and download all in Toto attestations, all these things, all like essentially save all those things locally, and then be able to kind of then process, like essentially pull them all in, process them as I need to, pull in additional things as I need to, and then be able to query, hey, which packages use salsa? Where do what are their in toto predicates? Blah, blah, what are the in toto attestations I have related to this thing? Again, in a not keeping it as a graph natively, because obviously the concerns and issues we've had, but following some of what Dayon was saying, like, I feel like we probably could build out a graph pulling in just the relevant information for a particular like package URL, looking up like the SBOMs and some of the other data that's associated with it without necessarily needing to go down that rabbit hole. Brendan.
Yeah, it sounds like, at least my understanding of what's being said, right, is I think we both GUAC and Justification have this model of like, okay, blobs that come in raw data and then pass it into some other data format, which is easy to query. And now we're kind of like gravitating towards the solution that's like from a 2-stage to a 3-stage, where it's like raw blobs, process like predicates, and then do like less like more transient, but like creating structures from the predicates.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we're seeing though is it's kind of, it's like maybe 3 steps for like the complicated analysis, but it's actually maybe 1 step for the simple stuff of like, hey, I just want to scan this SBOM, and in the moment I just want to scan this SBOM, and then hey, but I want to then scan, like take those results, and then part of that as like step 1, I just able to provide you this feedback. Step 2 is I still throw it out there and kind of with the analysis cached, so that you have it. And then like step 3 is like, hey, yeah, like I'm now doing sort of the deeper analysis based on the analysis that was saved in step 2. So like step 2, hey, you know, I think that's kind of that mostly, I think, yeah, makes sense there. And again, I think that the idea here is I want to keep it flexible as much as possible, and to avoid the schema issues we ran into with GUAC. Because and again, I think the thing here would be not going to have GraphQL in there. You know, and ideally what I would do is like, it sounds like if I start to use Parquet and some of the Apache stuff, you have that SQL-like language that you can use. And then the other thing that I think ties into some of the other stuff that we have. So I looked at this, and it does look like there's a process by which what you do is you throw everything into Parquet. You can then layer, you could potentially then do multiple sort of things. But one of the things you can do is you can then load that into memory, generate the graph, and then you essentially use Tinkerpop, and then you can put OpenCipher on top. Again, this is where I don't want to overcomplicate it for now, so I'm just going to keep it simple. I think the idea is just, hey, I want to convert this to something like Parquet, which is a universal sort of format. And because it's Parquet, all you're doing with the JSON is, from my understanding, is just like, you're not generating a schema for it. You just quite literally say, hey, I have this data and I turn it into this. I essentially parse out the JSON to do these things. And then you could then have these Avro and other things that are essentially virtual tables. So they're not like, if you ever change the schema, you're not actually changing the schema. You're just creating essentially a new virtual table. And so you could always go back in time. And then because also everything is timestamped, you get the ability to say, hey, what did we know when? If we didn't collect enough data, that's fine. We can say, hey, the new schema will not work with some of the old data because we're actually missing dates, or we're missing like, you know, we require a salsa for everything now. Oh, great. The old stuff didn't have salsa, so we weren't collecting it. So we actually can't perform these queries, and that's okay. And supposedly, at least again, the Apache big data stuff just sort of takes care of it. So we'll see. But anyway, that's kind of what I've been doing there. And again, I think with the intent here being not to replace GUAC, trustification, yada yada, it's to sort of complement what we're doing there, and to also provide that simple, like, I don't want to spin up all this other stuff. I just want to run this as a single binary with everything embedded, and I'm running everything locally. And then potentially in the future, oh, great, let's work with trustification, let's work with GUAC to now provide the sort of like daemonized service layer that can then interact with this to then do some of this other stuff. And also, I think it provides a reasonable test bed to test out some of the new data, like the new GUAC data model stuff, because, hey, I don't need to spin up a new schema every time we make a change. Hey, we just update a couple of lines. Maybe we update some sort of protobuf, Avro. I don't know how that's actually going to look like, but I think that kind of makes sense. Anyway, I don't want to keep ranting about that, but that's kind of the basic idea. Does that make sense? Does it seem completely off base?
I think this is in line at least with like the stuff we talked about with the 2.0 ontology, right? Where it's like we all have a binary that just takes input and spits out like the data model, right? it seems like you're taking one additional step here. It's like doing that plus like then do other stuff on top of it. But I do like the simplicity of just like taking blobs, taking inputs, spit out blobs, and then doing something else with it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's with all the different commands that you have, it's a little bit confusing to me what's what.
Oh, yeah. Just to be
Yeah.
clear, these commands were, I want to test out a thing, add this command. Whereas normally I would imagine in the future it would look something like something like mole query, vulnerability, mole query
Yeah,
license.
Uh,
That that
Yeah.
it would be a much clearer thing, and then maybe mole query SQL, and then have some sort of ability to like run more complicated SQL queries. But the idea again is the
Yeah, I think it just wasn't clear like which, like we talked about like the predicate data format, and then like the kind of like whatever if you put it in the bucket or anything format, and it's like it wasn't clear which was operating on which.
Oh yeah, so all of
Yeah.
this yeah, that's true. So I think it would follow a similar process to what we're currently doing, is you have collection, parsing / ingestion, and then like analysis or sorry, certification. So ideally it would follow something like that, that sort of process, sort of like what we're doing before. Um and that's kind of how I would think about.
I mean, I see this as a great, like you said, as a great like CLI or like a unification tool around the data model, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, so it can be used as like someone's implementing something, they want to use the data model, they can use this to kind of like understand how it works and like
Yeah.
see, like doing tests, like they can use it to create test cases and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I like this. Is super cool.
Yeah, I need to familiarize myself more with the Parquet, but this looks very promising.
Yeah, and I hope to publish it probably by Friday or so. A lot of the code right now is like a complete mess, of like a combination of code I wrote, a combination of me asking the AI of like, how does this thing work in Rust? How do I do this? And then it probably doing things that are not great, which I need to sort of go back and fix. But yeah, like for the most part right now, there is like 2 crates. There is sorry, 3 crates. There's this scanner crate, which is my OSV scanner that run. This doesn't run for Mole, but it's something I wrote that can cache OSV and run it all locally, but it requires a lot more work. There is so this called MSST, which just stands for Mike's Special Supply Chain Toolkit. um, which there is like a bunch of stuff in here for helping out with like OSV advisories, SBOMs, versioning, that kind of thing. And versioning, I mean like doing some ver. And there's also the main stuff is under Mole here. And there's like a couple of different files. Like there's the cache, which is more like an index or storage. Um, and there's stuff like the scanner, which, uh, essentially just runs the actual OSV scanning. There's a file for the OSV API that I wrote, and some other stuff. Dayon.
So I was just wondering about that offline OSV scanner that you mentioned. So how would that work?
So there's two things. So this one is something I had worked on. So the reason why I put Mole in here was a few months ago I was playing around with caching OSV locally. And so I started working on some of that, but also realizing, wow, I don't have enough time to actually really kind of investigate all of that. So if I show you this, so essentially it processes some files for here. Actually, how do I want to explain this? It pretty much what it does is it downloads. You have to download all of the OSV stuff locally, and then it puts everything in a in-memory cache. So, but it's essentially an index that's an in-memory cache. So you essentially have package. You essentially have, this is where needed to do a bit more thinking. You essentially have these a way of looking up a key based on a version where you say, hey, I have this Perl. Does this Perl match this key? And that key is essentially like a fuzzy key because, you know, it has to fall within the Semver version and so on and so forth. And so it essentially just sort of does a lookup based on the package URL. Fetches, oh, here are all the vulnerabilities that are associated with that specific package URL version based on running this like simple function, and then just collects all those files and then just throws them, you know, in the results. And the thing I was seeing, this was prior to OSV getting the batch stuff when I first started working on this, but this was the sort of thing of like, I could probably get, you know, 35 gigs of SBOMs in about 90 seconds to scan. But again, I think I plan to publish this as part of that whole thing as well, with sort of telling folks, hey, just so you know, this is very much a work in progress. Because the challenge I found was, and too bad, too bad, what's his name? Santiago is not here. Because one of the things I have, one of the issues I have is the Debian version requirements. Like that to me is confusing. Like the Debian epoch stuff is kind of confusing, and some of the Semver stuff can get a little complicated on how you want to determine, like in a security advisory, like it affects, you know, affects everything between 0 and 3, and you're like, well, does it affect 2 dash alpha 1? Like I don't know. Yeah, Dan.
So yeah, I think that topic gets more complicated the more you look. So each of the ecosystems has its own quirks. So RPMs and Python stuff and Go stuff. So prepare to have some fun, because we are doing similar thing in Trustify with implementing all those version matching functions for different ecosystems, and yeah, they're all a little bit different. So Semver is actually an exception.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And again, I think one of the other ideas for this was to also create a set of libraries, right? Because the idea as well is, since there's the core, the core crate and some of these other ones, is to create a set of libraries that can be parsed out, so that if folks want to just, oh, I just want to use how the GUAC folks are thinking about parsing SBOMs. Oh, this is how they think about parsing SBOMs. This is how they think about ingesting in Toto and those sorts of things. I think that would be valuable, just to kind of like have some libraries there that folks can use. Because again, folks have actually asked us for the Go stuff. It's like, hey, it'd be really cool if I could use this, but the way it's sort of structured is like the output is always going to be into GUAC. And what can we do to like maybe simplify that a bit and stuff like that. Anyway, I'll push some of this stuff out, and then I think one of the follow-ups I want from us is what would it take to get everybody, like, you know, what would it take for us to start thinking about that data model and where should that live? Because what I would want to be able to do is we have that data model in some sort of format, preferably not Shackle, just because the libraries for anything other than Java and Python are not great. And I'm not a huge fan of the how they kind of manage all that stuff. But if there's some way for us to start thinking about that data model in some way, you know, whether it's protobufs, whether it's Avro, whether it's whatever, I don't care. Then I think what I can do is we can start to like use this sort of thing as well as like a test bed for, hey, we changed this and this, we added this. Yeah. Anyway, without having to go in and say, hey, let's restructure all of GUAC right this second. Or Trustify, right? You know, we don't want to like say, hey, Trustify, you know, we're thinking about this is like version alpha 2 or 2 alpha for the new data model. Great, let's completely redo it right the second in order to test it. That's it for me.
All right. Anything else for this week?
I just wanted to see how the meeting went with the integrity working group. Is there any feedback? Sorry, I couldn't attend.
Yeah, so they seemed pretty on board with it. The main feedback we got was just adding a little more context to the proposal, just about, you know, explaining what GUAC and Trustify are to people who are less familiar with the projects. You know, just so that way it becomes a little more clear to the reader, you know, why we think there's some synergy and some value in the merging. But other than that, yeah, everybody seemed pretty on board with it.
Cool. So anything I can help with, or what are our next steps?
Yeah, I think we wanted to get sign off on that doc today. So let me just bring it up. I don't think I got any comments on. So the only comment I got from Isaac, which I shared this with, was that we should say something about what justification and GUAC is for those people that don't know what it is in the background. But other than that, it looks like there's no other comments from at least the maintainers and folks in the community. So is that I'm assuming we want to approve this doc as what the proposal for the community is, and then I think I can work with Ben to wordsmith this a little bit. I'm not sure whether we want to put in marketing from your side if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, we will eventually. I don't know that we need to wordsmith this one too much, just because, like, you know, we'll end up, anything we say publicly about it will be, you know, built from this as opposed to being directly this.
Okay.
So I think, you know, if we kind of get, you know, final sign off then we can start the process of having the lawyers talking to each other to deal with the trademark handoff, especially in light of news from the CNCF last week involving some of their trademark stuff. I imagine the lawyers are a little more sensitive to those things right now.
Okay. So I think the only request then is, Dayan, if you can provide maybe one short paragraph of like what is justify as justification to put as part of the document,
Okay.
and then I think that will wrap up this document, and then we can share it more broadly with the OpenSSF community.
Yeah, I think so.
What are you guys planning to rug pull?
Oh no, did you see Nats last week?
No.
So the company that makes Nats, or that, even though it's a CNCF project, in their defense, like if you look at the top 10 contributors, all employees of the company, but they were like, hey, we plan to only do BSL now for Nats, and CNCF was like, that ship has sailed. You don't get to do that. We own the CNCF owns that.
The trademark.
Yeah, they own the trademark.
Yes.
And again, that's where I think like the company is more than welcome to fork it and then do whatever they want with it. But again, I think the thing that I get, I could rant about this for a while, but let's just say, like, on the one hand, rug pulling is terrible. On the other hand, great, you gave CNCF a bunch of stuff that, like, the clouds are all running as services, and the only people who seem to be contributing are from one company. And if you look at the majority of stuff other than maybe issues, it's like the majority of folks who write code all come from the one company. And so there's that trade-off of like, yes, there's community, there's a bunch of other stuff that is still value there, but I can see why a company goes and says, hey, this is not sustainable because, not going to name names, but insert major cloud provider is took the open source bit, they're selling it and saying they could do it better than me, the person who's writing the code for it. So like, at what point in time do I say it's not really worth my time if major cloud providers or other folks want to go and contribute code, who want to go and do these things, hey, it's more sustainable for us to all have a shared sort of space where we can make money. But anyway, with that said, you don't rug pull. I'm sorry. It's just that ship has sailed.
That was fun to know. Cool. I for some reason can't seem to tag the end in this doc. But if I'm gonna link the doc in the chat. I added a section about justification / justify. I don't know which order you want to have it: justify / justification. If you can fill in that section, I think we can publish this stuff.
Cool. And do you need it today or tomorrow is okay?
I mean, as soon as you get it done, then we can push it up. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, I know it's confusing because we changed things, but I think we will go with Trustify going further. So I'll change the doc accordingly.
Okay. Sounds good.